We have some breaking news in the world of artificial intelligence. OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, just released a 39-page report about why LLM models hallucinate. Now, regardless of if you use ChatGPT, Grok, Claude, Gemini, DeepSeek, you name it, they all suffer from the same problem, and that is hallucinating. And that's a big problem because a lot of us are using AI as the backbone and foundation of our businesses, of our jobs, and maybe even our regular life. And a good example for regular life is if you need legal advice. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes these models will literally just make things up. And the TLDR of why these models hallucinate is because they were trained to reward guessing instead of honesty. So at the end of the day, these model makers tell the models you need to sound confident, and if that means you need to guess and make something up, then you need to guess and make something up. But whatever you do, don't come back and just say, hey, I don't know. Now, there's a couple reasons why training creates mistakes. Because if you're not familiar with these LLM models, for example, ChatGPT 5 launched not too long ago. What happens is the company will create or gather a lot of data, and they will train the model on that data. But the way these models learn is in patterns and not in truth. And so sometimes the patterns will point to the wrong answer instead of the correct answer. And even worse, sometimes they'll just make it up. However, if you're asking questions like, how does a combustion engine work? How do trees grow? And why do some trees grow better in humid climates versus colder climates? Those are questions that they're going to be able to knock out of the park. But if you say, hey, here's my legal case, here's the state I'm dealing with, what's the precedent say? That's going to be a much more fringe use case. It's going to be a lot more difficult to answer. Even if the data you're training on is absolutely perfect, it's still going to make mistakes. And the reason is because pattern learners will sometimes copy the wrong pattern. And so once again, all of these models, what they really are is prediction and pattern models at the end of the day. And sometimes that pattern is incorrect. And then we have the whole issue of testing. So they'll obviously test these models before they release them. They'll run them against benchmarks so that they can get scores in the benchmarks. And most benchmark scores, or pretty much all of them, are either right or they're wrong. And so what that means is there's no credit for the model to say, I don't know. It's either right or it's wrong. And so if the scoring is free, sometimes the best option is to just guess, even if you don't know the answer, because you'll at least still get rated if you do get it right. So what this leads to is exactly what we just talked about at the beginning of the video, is that these models will sound very confident instead of just simply admitting, hey, I actually don't know the answer to that question. What ChatGPT has started working on is allowing the models to just simply say, I don't know. And I got that answer on GPT-5 the other day, and it was very refreshing because I've never gotten that answer before from a model. So one big tweak that OpenAI is making is instructing ChatGPT to only answer if it is 1,000% confident. If it is at all unsure of the answer, they want it to reply and just simply say, I don't know. And from there, it's pretty easy to evaluate if it's giving an honest answer. You can ask it questions that you know are very fringe, that you know the answer to. And if it responds, I don't know, then that means that model is tracking in the way that you want it to. And so what this actually means in the real world, we always talk about, this next model is going to have this many parameters. It's going to be this big. But the problem is that doesn't even matter if the incentives are misaligned. So from day one of training, the model needs to know that if it doesn't know the answer, it needs to simply say, I don't know, or something like, hey, I'm not 100% sure. I think this is the answer, but this is my best guess. And that's still better than just making something up and hallucinating. So like I said, this is a 39-page paper, but honestly, I can summarize it all with what I just said. And what we can expect moving forward is much more honest models, which is great for anyone that relies on these LLMs to help them with work, to help them with any of these fringe use cases that you could possibly imagine. So what I'm expecting is the other model makers are going to kind of fall in line and they're going to do something similar. And what we'll see is we'll have a lot more LLMs that just say, hey, you know what? I don't know the answer to that question, but here's my best guess, or here's where you can go look to try to find out for yourself. And, there will come a day probably where they can just answer any question without fail. But this is huge for like the legal industry, for customer support teams, for anyone that, has to answer accurately or else they are punished. This is going to be really, really important because you can have a lot more confidence that the answer you're getting is one that you can either use or just say, hey, you know what? It doesn't know the answer to that, and that's totally fine. We just built a huge AI build for a law firm, actually. And one of the biggest issues that they were concerned about is hallucinations. Now, there are things you can do, like grounding the answers in a RAG system, have a true-false system underneath the LLM. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. I won't get into it in this video, but in the short term, that does eliminate 99.9% of hallucinations. However, in the future, you're not going to need those systems. And I don't know if that's a year in the future, 2 years in the future. It'll probably be 2-ish years, I would imagine, because they have to train these models, make sure they're right. But man, am I looking forward to the day when I know for 100% sure that my answer from my LLM is correct, because otherwise it would just simply say, I don't know. So if you are not subscribed to this channel, the whole purpose is to make AI accessible for people that may not be engineers or just don't have time to learn it all yourselves. So if you're a business owner, if you have a job, or if you're a human being with a regular life, my goal is to bring you actionable insights that you can use to have AI improve your business, life, job, whatever it is that you need to use it for. So make sure you subscribe, leave a comment. I make videos and replies to comments all the time, and I really appreciate your time today.